Now, anti-capitalist struggle and strategy has thus, insofar, under this argument that I'm making, has thus been somewhat understandably, as I said, wholly anti. And ensuing left organization and politics has largely revolved around these different tactics and location. And this is important for us, comrades, here. Our left has reflected the parochialism of South Africa. We are very regional in our politics. There's Joburg, there's Cape Town, there's Durban. No, we have these identities, political and regional identities, that prevent us from unifying. And we've got to deal with this. This parochialism, this regional, protecting our territory. You know, it's like the boundary between KZN and Gauteng. You will not pass there. You know? It's the same we have with Zimbabweans. Limpopo River, which was a river, now becomes a border because of colonialists, and then we engage in a thing that the people who live on that side are fundamentally different than the ones who live on this side. So, in that context, comrades, we've got to understand that the divisions that divide us, whether they're administrative, political, or whatever, organizational, are simply constructed ones. They're not natural in any meaning. We can have all of the ideas and programs, but if we do not have committed, disciplined cadres with integrity, we are pissing in the wind. Sorry to use that expression, but that's what it is. And it's not just about whether or not people act like teenagers when they're in the resis. It's about whether or not people respect organizational resources. It's about whether or not they treat each other with respect. It's about all of those kinds of things. I use the metaphor of a family. Those who you love the most, if you cannot treat those you love the most with respect, how do you expect to revolutionize society and create love on one another? How? Because this is not necessarily, comrades, I mean, I've always been considered myself a hard activist, you know, hard, intense, everything. But underneath that, comrades, it's a spirit of humanity. It's a spirit of goodness, right? Of creating something different. If we are just as hard as the capitalists, then if we haven't learned from history that could quickly turn into being just as authoritarian and just as reactionary and just as discriminatory. And in that context, fundamental to any new strategy is a renewal of our own individual and collective spirit of human dignity and the values and principles. When we say socialism, when we say anti-capitalism, what are the values and principles that underline that other than the big things? What are the fundamental values and principles that underlie that? If we identify those, and those inform our practical activities, people will begin to respect us. They will begin to pay attention to you. As I said yesterday, the Gogo who's sitting there, and you're coming and saying, Gogo, please join us in this thing. We want you to be part of this struggle. And the Gogo says, hey, sorry, I'm not going to be part of you. I've seen how you treat each other. I've seen how you guys relate to each other. I've seen you argue all the time, constantly, and shout and scream and everything else. I don't want to be part of that. So, in that context, comrades, we must live what we preach. In that, as much as possible. We all make mistakes, we all mess up. But in the context of that, and this is not something that can be given over to the right wing all the time. They have taken this always. The left has failed, we have fundamentally failed to take the terrain of the individual and personal responsibility in these things and say, that's not left. We're only about the big picture. We're only about the collective. No, everybody is their own person as well. If we don't recognize that individuality as well, then we are going to sell ourselves very short. Because we have to have a new spirit. Thank you.